The Supreme Court is putting on hold a lower court ruling barring the government from regulating so-called ghost guns
because they're easily available on the internet and hard for law enforcement to track.
This is a violation of that federal law. The federal judge that initially ruled in this agreed, saying it's up to Congress.
Pistol, it can become a short-barreled rifle, and then it's subject under the National Firearms Act. That's what you're saying.
Well, I've got here the actual original brace that this letter was responsive to.
A divided Supreme Court today allowing the Biden administration to continue enforcing regulations on ghost guns.
Supreme Court's involvement in ghost gun regulation. The Supreme Court showdown over ghost guns, where the Biden administration's efforts to rein in these sneaky firearms collided head-on with legal battles. In this 5-4 nail-biter, the Supreme Court hit pause on a lower court's decision that threw a wrench into the ATF's regulations on ghost guns. Surprise, surprise, Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, teaming up with the liberal justices, pumped the brakes on that lower court ruling. On the other side, Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh were standing firm against the Biden administration's plea. And here's the kicker, this decision meant the ATF's restrictions on these untraceable firearms could stay put while the legal wrestling match continued. It's like a timeout in a high-stakes game, giving these regulations a breather amidst all the legal back and forth. Picture this standoff at the highest court, where some justices formed an unexpected alliance to keep these regulations in play while the legal drama unfolds. It's a temporary win for those aiming to tighten the leash on ghost guns, but the battle is far from over in this courtroom clash. Biden administration's efforts to control ghost guns. The Biden administration wasn't sitting idly by when it came to tackling the ghost gun conundrum. Picture this. They rolled out this heavyweight rule through the ATF in August 2022, aiming to put a lasso around these untraceable firearms that were popping up all over thanks to those crafty DIY kits available online. What was this rule all about? It was a revamp of the Gun Control Act's definition of firearm, zeroing in on those ghost guns made from kits. The goal? To slap some much-needed regulations on those sneaky creations. But here's the thing. They weren't banning the sale, purchase, or possession of the guns. They were going for a more strategic approach. Licenses, serial numbers, background checks, and keeping tabs on records for specific kits became the name of the game.
The Supreme Court is putting on hold a lower court ruling barring the government from regulating so-called ghost guns.
In the view of this White House, that includes allowing a federal agency like ATF to regulate the scope.
Supreme Court decision basically pauses a lower court decision that blocked the Biden administration
because they're easily available on the internet and hard for law enforcement to track.
It was like putting guardrails on these DIY projects without stopping folks from building them. Imagine it like this. The administration wanted to make it a bit tougher for these untraceable firearms to sneak into the mix without putting a full stop on the hobbyist gun-making scene. So they set out to sprinkle a bit of regulation magic on these kits, aiming to make sure they didn't slip through the cracks without a trace. ATF's rule and legal challenge. Talk about a bumpy ride for the ATF's rule on ghost guns. As soon as the ATF put forward those regulations, there was a whole chorus of challenges ringing out. Gun owners, advocacy groups, and sellers weren't exactly throwing a party in celebration. Instead, they banded together, claiming that these restrictions were overstepping their bounds. They argued that the ATF had gone a tad too far, waltzing outside their statutory authority. And guess what? The legal tango ensued. A district court took the first swing, blocking some of those provisions faster than you can say ghost gun. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no. In July 2022, things took a turn when a judge sided with the plaintiffs, slamming the brakes on the regulation nationwide. It was like a giant red stop sign suddenly appeared, putting the kibosh on these regulations from coast to coast. So imagine this regulatory journey hitting roadblocks left, right, and center. The courts were dishing out decisions that seemed to throw a curveball each time, leaving the ATF's rule caught in this legal tug-of-war. Just when it seemed like progress was being made, the legal gavel came down hard, hitting pause on those regulations and stirring the pot for more legal showdowns. Impact of ghost guns on crime and communities. Let's talk about the real-world implications of these ghost guns. They're like a wild card in the deck, causing some serious headaches. The big worry? These untraceable firearms sneaking into communities like shadowy accomplices, potentially giving a helping hand to the wrong crowd. It's the kind of situation that had the Biden administration scrambling to put a lid on it. Why all the fuss, you ask? Well, once these untraceable guns are out there in the wild, sold and without a trace, they're like a ticking time explosive. They pose a real conundrum for law enforcement. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. That's the challenge these ghost guns throw at the folks trying to keep our streets safe. It's a genuine concern because once these weapons hit the streets, they're a blank page as far as tracing their origin or tracking their use. They become a wild card in crime scenes, making it incredibly tough for law enforcement to connect the dots. And that's precisely why the Biden administration stepped in, trying to curb this trend before it snowballed into a bigger problem. Ghost guns might seem like a distant, mysterious concept, but their impact hits home when it comes to community safety. ATF's directive on unfinished handgun frames. Let's talk about the ATF's new directive. It's a game changer in the world of unfinished handgun frames. Imagine this. The ATF stepped in and said, hey vendors, those partially finished frames, treat them like the real deal. It's like turning the spotlight on these half-done frames and saying, you're not escaping the rules. Now, what does that mean in plain English? It means these once under-the-radar frames now need to play by the big rules. They've got to sport serial numbers, just like their fully assembled cousins.
The Supreme Court has voted to reinstate regulations on untraceable homemade weapons known as ghost guns.
The administration issuing those regulations last year, saying the guns are a major threat to public safety.
Crime in major cities in recent years. The weapons can be bought online.
The High Court's ruling grants the Biden administration's request to let the regulations remain in effect.
And buyers? Well, they're not getting off easy either. Now they've got to go through those background checks, a move that's like putting a lock on the door of easy access to these unregulated frames. This change in the game could put the brakes on the sale of these frames that have been linked to all sorts of unsavory stuff. It's like shining a light on a previously shadowy corner of the market. By imposing these stricter regulations, the ATF's essentially making it tougher for these unfinished frames to slip through the cracks, potentially disrupting the flow of unregulated parts into the wrong hands. Gun safety advocates were quick to cheer as the ATF made its move towards stricter regulations on ghost guns. It was like music to their ears, a round of applause echoing across the advocacy groups. Finally, steps were being taken to rein in these elusive firearms that had been causing quite the stir. For them, it was a victory, a step towards making communities safer. These groups weren't just clapping from the sidelines either. They were front and center, urging the ATF to step up and take decisive action. It wasn't just a casual nudge, it was a loud chorus of voices calling for action. They saw the growing issue of untraceable firearms as a ticking time explosive, and they weren't about to sit back and watch. Advocacy groups didn't just want talks or promises, they wanted boots on the ground, regulations in place, anything to tackle this rising problem. It was a rallying cry for change, a push to make sure these ghost guns didn't slip through the cracks anymore. Their support for the ATF's move wasn't just about celebrating a win, it was about pressing for more. They knew that stricter regulations weren't just about paperwork or rules, they were about potentially saving lives. So for these advocates, every step forward was a victory in the battle for safer communities, and they weren't about to back down until they saw real change take root. When the ATF dropped its shocker of guidance on the gun industry, you could almost hear the collective scratching of heads. Gun industry reps weren't exactly popping champagne. Instead, they were raising eyebrows, expressing their fair share of confusion. They weren't shy about voicing their concerns either, waving the flag of potential legal challenges high in the air. Their big gripe? They saw this new guidance as a potential slap in the face to the Gun Control Act.
A divided Supreme Court today allowing the Biden administration to continue enforcing regulations on ghost guns.
Last year, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives updated its regulations to define the kids.
The appeals court that was asked to step in and allow the regulations to continue agreed with the district court judge.
Ghost guns are firearms without serial numbers, making them practically untraceable.
It wasn't just confusion in the air, there was a palpable sense of anticipation too. The industry wasn't gearing up for a celebration, they were strapping in for a legal roller coaster ride. There was this looming expectation of legal battles looming on the horizon, and they weren't expecting tea and cookies, it was more like a heavyweight showdown. And guess who was gearing up for this legal tango? Gun rights groups were front and center, polishing their legal swords. They weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, they were ready to charge headfirst into legal battles against this guidance. It was a clash of ideologies, a battleground where regulations collided with rights. In this game of legal chess, everyone was eyeing their next move. The industry was wary, the gun rights groups were ready to fight, and the legal battlefield was all set for a showdown. It was the calm before the storm, with legal challenges brewing and industry players gearing up for a fight to defend their turf. State and city measures to regulate ghost guns. In the midst of this ghost gun chaos, states and cities were rolling up their sleeves, taking matters into their own hands. Places like New York, Washington, and Los Angeles weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They were diving headfirst into the fray, passing laws or even taking manufacturers to court, all in the name of reining in those sneaky ghost guns. But here's the twist in the tale. Not every state or city responded in the same way. It was a patchwork quilt of reactions. Some states, fired up and ready to make a change, went full steam ahead, enacting their own regulations to curb the ghost gun surge. It was like putting up their own roadblocks against these untraceable firearms.
The Supreme Court has decided for now that the Biden administration's crackdown on so-called ghost guns.
This is a violation of that federal law. The federal judge that initially ruled in this agreed, saying it's up to Congress.
And they're saying, they have the authority to do that. The gun rights groups that are suing
on ghost gun kits, which make firearms untraceable. The regulation will be in effect while the administration appeals the ruling.
However, not everyone was singing from the same hymn sheet. Some states found themselves butting heads with federal rules, facing off in legal showdowns. It was like a tug-of-war between local and federal regulations, leaving some places caught in a legal limbo. Imagine this regulatory battleground. Some places forging ahead with their own rules, others entangled in legal spats, all trying to navigate their way through this maze of regulations and challenges. It's like a puzzle where every state and city was trying to fit their own piece into the larger picture of tackling these elusive ghost guns. The legal circus surrounding the Biden administration's federal rule on ghost guns. It's been quite the roller coaster ride. Brace yourself for this. There's been a flurry of lawsuits launched against this rule. Some suits, like a door hitting a wall, got rejected right off the bat. But wait, there's more. Others found themselves in the court limelight, waiting for their turn under the legal microscope. It's been a tug-of-war in the courts, with some of these lawsuits meeting an early end, while others are still in the ring duking it out. It's like a legal drama playing out in slow motion, each lawsuit adding another chapter to this ongoing saga. So picture this legal battlefield, lawyers on both sides gearing up for battle, arguments flying like arrows in courtrooms across the country. Some cases hit a dead end, while others are still in the legal pipeline, waiting for their moment to shine. It's a high-stakes game, and the legal wheel keeps turning as these lawsuits navigate their way through the judicial maze, all with the fate of the federal rule hanging in the balance. In the arena of ghost gun regulations, it's been a battlefield of political ideologies and industry opposition. Cue the conservative groups, gun lobbies, and the staunch opposition they've raised against the Biden administration's executive action. It's been a clash of perspectives, a battleground where opinions on gun regulations have collided head-on. They haven't just raised their voices, they've come armed with legal challenges, aiming to put a stop sign in front of these new regulations. But that's not all. There's this looming cloud of anticipation for potential litigation hovering over these regulations. The critics aren't just grumbling, they're prepping their legal artillery, ready to fire shots at these regulations. Their beef? They're pointing fingers, alleging that these new rules might be playing a game of tug-of-war with existing federal laws. This political standoff and industry opposition is like a game of chess where every move is being strategized, every argument carefully crafted. The opposition isn't just waving banners. They're gearing up for a legal showdown, expecting these regulations to face off against the weight of existing laws. It's a political tug-of-war, a legal chess match, with the fate of these ghost gun regulations hanging in the balance as political and industry forces clash over the direction of gun control policies. In the heart of a contentious debate swirling around gun rights and regulations, Georgia Congressman Andrew Clyde has taken center stage with legislation aiming to reverse federal rules concerning firearm stabilizing braces. This measure recently cleared the House Judiciary Committee, prompting celebration from Clyde, who labeled it a triumph for Second Amendment freedoms, with the next destination being the House floor. So what's all the fuss about these stabilizing braces? These accessories are designed to reduce the recoil of firearms, offering a gentler shooting experience, particularly beneficial for individuals with physical disabilities. However, a recent move by the ATF reclassified certain pistols as rifles under the National Firearms Act if equipped with these stabilizing braces. This reclassification has mandated gun owners to register their firearms or modify them to comply with the new regulations.
Pistol, it can become a short-barreled rifle, and then is subject under the National Firearms Act. That's what you're saying.
The submitted firearm brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert that weapon to be fired from the shoulder and would not alter the classification.
Administration officials and anti-gun advocates and even the president himself mischaracterizing that immunity.
That are not designed and intended to be shouldered would be classified and not covered.
The stage is set for a significant clash, one that goes beyond the technicalities of firearm laws. It's a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate surrounding gun rights and regulations, with the fate of Clyde's legislation hanging in the balance. As the political tug-of-war continues, the implications of this bill ripple through the larger discourse on gun control, individual rights, and the accessibility of firearms in the U.S. A threat to legal gun ownership. The ATF's redefinition of stabilizing braces has sent shockwaves through the firearms community. Imagine waking up one day feeling perfectly fine about owning a pistol with a stabilizing brace. A device initially designed to assist individuals with disabilities in handling firearms, and suddenly being told that you might be breaking the law. That's the whirlwind lawful gun owners find themselves in when the ATF decided to reclassify these braces, effectively tagging certain pistols as short-barreled rifles. However, these accessories evolved. Enthusiasts within the broader gun-owning community saw their potential and began using them too. They adapted pistols for shoulder shooting, a practice that gained popularity and acceptance within the existing rules. But the trouble started when the ATF decided to scrutinize these accessories. They began to view pistols with stabilizing braces, especially those adapted for shoulder shooting, as a bridge too far. What once seemed okay under the regulations suddenly fell into a gray area. The agency's redefinition transformed a tool initially meant to aid disabled individuals into a headache for lawful gun owners. It blurred the line between what was legal yesterday and what might land someone in legal trouble today. In essence, the ATF's move took a helpful tool and turned it into a regulatory nightmare, leaving responsible gun owners feeling blindsided and uncertain about their status within the law. In 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt faced a brewing storm concerning firearm regulation. The issue at hand wasn't exactly about banning firearms, but rather controlling them. FDR was eyeing fully auto firearms for potential restriction, but the Department of Justice swatted that down, claiming it might breach the Second Amendment. Roosevelt, not one to take defeat lightly, pivoted. He introduced a legislative move that would set the stage for the National Firearms Act of 1934. This act didn't outlaw auto weapons, but put stringent rules around them. It demanded the registration of fully auto firearms, short-barreled rifles, shotguns, and sound suppressors. The aim wasn't eradication, but control through a registry, highlighting how the government wanted to monitor potentially more dangerous firearms without a blanket ban. The historical resistance against national gun registries aligns with this ethos. The NFA itself was initially a compromise to avoid a complete ban on certain firearms by implementing a registry. However, it set a precedent for government oversight and control, something that's raising eyebrows today. These actions by the ATF might be seen as contradictory to the principles enshrined in the Second Amendment, inviting debate about where the line should be drawn between gun regulation and an individual's right to bear arms without excessive government scrutiny or control. It's a historical recurrence that raises pertinent constitutional questions about the balance between public safety and personal freedoms. When experts start waving red flags, it's time to pay attention. Many seasoned voices in the firearms realm have raised serious concerns about the fallout of criminalizing stabilizing braces, particularly for disabled individuals. Dr. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, is one of those voices. He's been vocal about how these braces were initially designed to assist wounded and disabled veterans in handling firearms. These accessories were a game changer for individuals like Rick Cicero, a veteran who lost his arm and leg in Afghanistan. These stabilizing braces gave Rick, and many others, an avenue to defend themselves effectively. Cicero, an advocate for injured veterans, highlighted how these tools weren't just about shooting, but also a means of reintegration and getting injured veterans out and active. Well, it's about the unintended consequences. By slapping legal restrictions on these braces, the government is potentially harming those they were initially meant to help. Criminalizing these tools doesn't just affect mainstream firearm enthusiasts, but also disabled individuals who rely on them for their daily security, and more importantly, their sense of freedom and autonomy. The real question is whether these justifications hold water. Sure, incidents occurred involving these accessories, but the evidence doesn't convincingly link the braces to the severity or outcome of those crimes. It's a case of using isolated incidents to justify a sweeping ban that could have far-reaching repercussions, especially for those in the disabled community. It's a debate where the balance between public safety concerns and the unintended impact on the vulnerable requires careful consideration. Constitutionality clash. The clash between Second Amendment rights and ATF regulations is heating up, sparking a debate about the boundaries of gun ownership and governmental oversight. Let's start with the Second Amendment. It's the cornerstone of the debate, enshrined in the Constitution. It safeguards an individual's right to bear arms. This right isn't just about owning firearms, it's a fundamental liberty for many Americans. It's a guarantee that individuals have the means to defend themselves, their families, and their properties. It's a check on potential governmental overreach, ensuring that citizens maintain a level of autonomy and protection. Now, enter the ATF. As an agency tasked with enforcing federal gun laws, its actions are under scrutiny. The recent reclassification of stabilizing braces as a means to regulate firearms raises questions about its alignment with constitutional principles.
Well, I've got here the actual original brace that this letter was responsive to.
Again, I think the president has given numerous different times he's talked about this provision.
And the implementation of your rule. Did Congress pass a law? What changed?
Administration effort to regulate ghost guns for now. The court voted 5-4 to put a ruling on hold from a federal judge in Texas.
You're not exempting the same brace that you gave this letter to.
Some argue that the ATF's move infringes on Second Amendment rights by introducing unnecessary regulations that undermine lawful gun ownership. It's a delicate dance between regulation for public safety and encroachment on constitutional freedoms. The public response has been quite vocal. Many gun owners and advocates are up in arms, pardon the pun, about the ATF's redefinition. There's significant opposition to what's seen as an overreach of authority. It's not merely about the inconvenience or cost of compliance, it's about the potential erosion of constitutional freedoms. People are worried that this might set a precedent, allowing administrative agencies to exert undue influence on constitutional rights without proper legislative backing. Defending the right to bear arms. Affected citizens are rallying against the ATF's ruling, expressing concerns about eroding rights and excessive government control. Calls for action flood social media and advocacy groups, urging resistance against what's seen as overreach. Legal challenges loom large, with several gun rights organizations gearing up to challenge the ruling's constitutionality. Recent court decisions, particularly those emphasizing legislative authority over administrative agency rulings, offer a glimmer of hope. These decisions signal a potential path for legal challenges, fostering optimism among gun rights advocates for a reversal or at least a limitation of the ATF's directive and its impact on the right to bear arms. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.